But first, Anthony Albanese has today announced he will haul social media companies before a parliamentary inquiry.
Well, I think this isn't just a matter of what government wants, it's what Australians want. Australians understand that social media plays an important role in people's lives. But with social media comes the need for social licence and a social responsibility. And I think that this will be an important inquiry for people and the community to engage in the debate about what is the role of social media, how do we make sure that social media's benefits continue whilst the potential for harmful impacts are minimised.
Now, there are a few aspects to this investigation, but it seems that Meta's decision to stop paying news organisations for content will be a core component. But there is another part of it which relates to so-called harmful content. Communications Minister Michelle Rowland told The Australian, Parliament needs to understand how social media companies dial up and down the content that supports healthy democracies, as well as the anti-social content that undermines public safety. Now, the problem with this line of questioning is who decides what undermines public safety? Now, I certainly hope these politicians don't propose that the responsibility should be theirs. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, social media companies were so fearful at the prospect of heavy-handed regulation that they proactively censored important news stories. Journalists who questioned draconian lockdowns or who reported on deaths caused by vaccines were openly censored by these companies. For example, this report by the ABC in 2021 could have got you in trouble if it was published to YouTube alongside an opinion deemed problematic. TGA links 2 deaths to rare COVID-19 vaccine side effect as nearly 10 million AstraZeneca jabs are administered. Now, if I held the view that it was not okay to allow some people to die in order to further the greater good of high vaccination rates, I would have faced censorship from social media platforms. And it's not just the forced denial of reality that occurred for the supposed greater good. We were told political decisions were based on science when it was a lie. And one of the most egregious examples of that was school closures. Here is Greg Hunt, the man who was the federal health minister during the pandemic, revealing those decisions were not based on science.
And so we encourage schools to be kept open. And the medical advice that we had is that there was a strong case for that. Now, I see a picture of Gladys Berejiklian. She went out of her way to try to keep schools open and functioning, and others did as well. There were some states where that was not the case.
Now, the reason I raise all of these examples is because any restrictions on our ability to debate and probe political decisions should be fiercely fought against. There are many politicians out there who use the word misinformation to describe legitimate criticism. And we saw it during the pandemic and we saw it during the Voice campaign. And do you really trust Albanese and his rabble of Labor MPs to always make the right call on what is supposedly anti-social content? Well, joining me now is the Australian's Darren Davidson and Sky News contributor James Bolt. James, let's start with you. Misinformation, it's a very loaded word. From my point of view, when a government is trying to determine what content should or should not be seen, they don't necessarily have the best track record.
No, it's what the content they want you to see is the stuff that makes them look good, and they'll hide the stuff that makes them look bad. Anthony Albanese, in that grab you just played, said that it's not about what the government wants. It is always about what the government wants. Now, they can dress it up. There's a lot of spin already about this. They say it's going to be looking into Meta not paying Australian news companies for their content. But and it feels weird saying this in Australia where our institutions get on, but in a pure Darwinian sense, media is the enemy of government. We hold them to account. The government does not stand to gain anything from us getting more influence and more money from social media companies. It actually works against the government in some way. They're not going to really care about that. In regards to exposing children to harmful content, kids will see that. And the more obvious policy changes are at schools saying, okay, no smartphones in school, or parents getting stricter. The only thing that I think this inquiry is about, as you said, is the end game of misinformation and being able to control what people see online. It's what governments have wanted since the dawn of time, the ability to control how people see them. And I just think that there's going to be a lot of misdirection. There's going to be a lot of, actually, we care about this. Don't worry about what we're actually doing. Got to look through that. It's all about government control over what people can and cannot say and can and cannot read.
What are your thoughts on the timing of this inquiry and I guess what it could uncover?
I think on the surface, in principle, it's a great idea to look at the what they call misinformation on the platforms. We've got 64 elections coming up around the world in the next 12 months. That's about 49% of the world's population will be voting in national elections. So it clearly poses a real ever-present threat to democracy. However, as you both say, and I agree, there's a danger here that it will be abused for political gain. I think the other point to make is we saw recently with a news bargaining code, Facebook effectively serve Australia the middle finger. These platforms seem to have a track record of just turning away from local laws in Australia and not following them and doing so in a very arrogant way. So, you know, there's a danger that the inquiry will just be impotent. But I do think it's a very good idea that they look at the news bargaining code. Good news coverage, as we all know, costs money to gather audiences. And the platforms have had a very unfair advantage for some time in terms of republishing original journalistic content to their own customers on their own site, serving ads against it and making money from it, but not actually sharing that money or that revenue with news outlets. And I think it's very, very important that that's looked at and the government, the Albanese government, enforce the news bargaining code.